Welcome, everybody. I'm William Peters, and I want to welcome you to our exciting webinar. This is actually an encore webinar. So if you're here and you're on last Thursday, this is going to be a repeat, but the Q&A will be completely new because that'll be coming from you all. So the webinar title is Awaken to the Transformational Power of the Shared Death Experience. And I'm here with my special guest, good friend and colleague, Sarah Kerr. And welcome, Sarah.
It's lovely to be here, William. Thank you.
And I'm going to formally introduce Sarah in a few moments. But for right now, I want to just say a bit about me, just so you know that I'm the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, and I'm the director of our research initiative. And I'm also just published my first book on the Shared Death Experience. It's At Heaven's Door: What Shared Journeys to the Afterlife Teach About Dying Well and Living Better. So we're really excited that you're joining us, and thank you. So many of you that are on this particular webinar let us know that making the Thursday time wasn't going to work for you, and you requested another time. And so that's great. We're also aware that there's a lot more international people on this call because it works better with people overseas. So thank you all for joining us. I want to say a little bit about the Shared Crossing Project. That's the sponsor of this event. And the Shared Crossing Project's mission is to positively transform people's relationship to end of life, death and dying, through raising awareness and educating people about these profound and mystical end of life experiences. We call these shared crossing experiences. Second part of our mission is to bring people together in community to dialogue about these experiences, share stories, affirm them, support one another, and integrate them into our lives so that these experiences, quite frankly, like everything in death and dying, we need to bring it more into the center of our life, make it more natural rather than something that's seemingly not right with life. So that's the Shared Crossing Project. We have a lot of wonderful resources on our website, and they're free. So it's sharedcrossing.com. I encourage you to look at our story library. This has been a dream of mine to manifest experiencers who have these shared death experiences and other mystical end-of-life experiences, to give them a place where they can share their story in their own words. The people you'll see in our Shared Crossing library currently, all are from our research. I think we have 8 or 9 currently, and we constantly update it with new cases. Also, if you want to share your story, you just go to our website, the contact page, and there's a place for you to share our story. We appreciate that greatly. Finally, if you want to join our community, you can go to our contact page. We have a monthly newsletter, and we also have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So we invite you to join us there. And by the way, when we do things on Facebook, we will have a series coming up where Raymond Moody and I will be answering some questions. We're going to post it there. So it's not just trivial material. We try to use our social media in a positive way. Okay, so housekeeping before we dive into the meat of this. Excuse me if you're a vegan or vegetarian, but you get the point. So we're going to have on our Zoom functions, we have chat and Q&A. The chat function is for you to share your stories, connect with others, give responses. It's a way for all of you who are listening in, which is now 100 people, to get acquainted with each other and see what's resonating with people. Kelly Rose, who's actually the technician for this whole webinar. She does a great job with this, as you can see. She'll be on there providing. And Michelle looks like wasn't going to say Michelle. Michelle's back east in Philadelphia. She'll also be on to provide comments and support for you. So feel free to ask questions, and you will get responses from our Shared Crossing team. Questions for Sarah and I should go in the Q&A, and we will get to those at the end of our session today. And we're providing for 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. So I want to tell you about the agenda specifically, so you know where we're headed. The next 35 minutes will be dedicated to the 3 transformative gifts of the shared death experience. And this is the first time I presented this in such a clear and direct way in an online format. So I'm excited about that. And then about 11:40 Pacific time, I will announce our newest group, which is going to be the most comprehensive group online. I should say it's a course, not a group, but it's a course, the most comprehensive course ever taught on the shared death experience, and actually in any format, to be quite frank about it. And so then there'll be time for Q&A after that. And yes, so with that, let me introduce Sarah. So Sarah and I have been friends and colleagues since we first met in 2014 at the Afterlife conference in Portland. We really became just allies and mutual supporters from each other right away. We shared a way of looking at end of life that was really about bringing, I mean, this is Sarah's, her organization, which is the Center for Sacred Deathcare, really focuses on the sacredness of death and dying, bringing it back into families, bringing it back into communities, creating rituals that are meaningful in the modern age around this. Sarah does a wonderful job. I often refer to her as an alchemist, a sage alchemist, bringing the best of ancient wisdom into the modern world and creating rituals that work for the families and communities she's working with. And to be really clear, she is a leader in this. She has quite a following. She's a teacher. Her online courses are extremely well received. So you should look up Sarah at her website. I'm going to give you that right now. The website is that's me, Sarah, sacreddeathcare.com. And I'm sure Kelly Rose is going to put that in the chat. Okay, so with that, welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, William. It's always a delight to collaborate with you. And yes, I mirror that sentiment that we have a very similar and compatible approach to this. And one of the things I really respect about your work is the depth of your research and the really solid grounding in strong research methodologies. Because I think this question you're asking about shared death care, or there's so many tongue twisters there, shared death experiences, it's really at the heart of transforming how we meet death. This experience that can happen to bystanders and family and friends who are in sound body and mind unravels all the critique of it. It just opens up such an incredible possibility. So I'm really excited to be part of that. And if folks haven't read William's book, I highly recommend that. I certainly recommend it to my students and clients. I train death doulas and I train end-of-life practitioners and just people who want to meet this in a more sacred way. And the shared death experience has had a big impact on me personally, not only professionally. It's really important in the work I do with my students and clients, as I say, but it's and this whole field I work in, but it's really given me a new way of seeing, or a deeper way of seeing, the mysteries of living and dying, and how to help people meet death well, how to imagine my own death, and how to live in a different way. So it's good for the end, and it's good for now too. And one of the things I just want to add is that there's lots of space in this conversation. And I know, William, you've had lots of really profound and deep near-death and shared death experiences. And I've been in those realms and seen little bits of them, certainly, but not the depth of it. But I want to make it really welcoming for people who haven't, that you can still be deep in here. You can still use these skills and use these teachings to support yourself and to support other people. So it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm glad you emphasized that, because some people will send in questions or requests. They want to do our groups or participate, and they often say, is it required that I've had a shared death experience or another shared crossing experience related to end of life? And we say, absolutely not. If you're interested in this, please come along, learn with us. One thing I'm absolutely sure about is where we are now in relationship to shared death experiences, spiritual experiences generally at the end of life, is not where we're going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because teachers like you, Sarah, are really bringing this in, integrating it, and making it part of our understanding for what is possible in an end-of-life experience. And not that they happen all the time. We know they don't. That's still the largest mystery we're embracing, is why does it happen to some and not to others? But we're learning more about that. So with that, I want to dive into our core kind of teaching today, really, is what we're doing. This is, I hope people find this information to be enlightening in a certain way, because I certainly do. But first, I want to define the shared death experience so everybody starts at a similar understanding for this, this really awesome experience. So a shared death experience occurs when somebody dies and a loved one, caregiver, or bystander reports that they feel like they shared in this transition with this dying person. And the transition begins at around human death. I don't say specifically just at that time of human death, because we see shared death experiences occur before and after actual medical death. So that's important, a little bit of wiggle room there. But the experiencer will say that they shared in the journey, or they witnessed the phenomena associated with the dying's transition experience. And they almost always use this term, I saw them, or I witnessed them, or I experienced the first stages of the afterlife. That's it. They go from this human dimension into typically a benevolent afterlife. So that's the shared death experience. And there are 3 gifts that we're going to be focusing on today. And the first one is, and these are just not gifts, they're insights, they're kind of knowledge points, if you will. The first is this: death is not an end, but a doorway into another existence, an existence that, in our research and others that are in this field, this existence is typically filled with love and kindness and kind of a sense of sublimeness to it, a sacredness, as Sarah uses that term quite a bit, and I think it fits here. The second gift that we'll be looking at is the sense that nobody dies alone. What we see in the shared death experience, and I should say we'll see in our case studies today as well, is that you're greeted on the other side of this human existence, typically by deceased loved ones or elevated spirit beings. Some people refer to them as angels. But there's some guidance and support in this transition process that should be encouraging to all of us. And the third gift of the SDE is that loving relationships continue. So yes, human death ends a human life, but it does not end a relationship. As we see in the shared death experience, the relationship between the loved ones and the dying continues, with one being on the other side of the veil and one remaining here in the human realm. And then we'll talk about some continued communication that seems to be set off or triggered in some ways by the SDE, perhaps. We'll play with that today. So without further ado, I would like to go into our first case study. And this is Julie. And Julie's going to be sharing a case, the death of her experience at the time of the death of her father. This is what we call a remote shared death experience. She'll be in Canada, and her father's dying somewhere, I believe in the lower Midwest of the United States. And I should say that Julie is an end-of-life educator and a published author. And I think we're going to be, Kelly Rose, are we going to provide some information about Julie on the chat or not? No? Yeah. Okay. She's going to put a little information about Julie so you know about her. It really did, as she'll say, it changed her career when she had this SDE, and now she's quite a leader in end of life. So this happens, her experience happens 3 days after her father died, and her father comes to her as a light body. So we're going to start this up right now. Bear with me as I work with the technology.
Very sound asleep. My father came to me as a light body, and I joined him. So we became one entity, one light entity, and we broke apart, and we became one entity. And then we went on an amazing trip. I guess you would call it, some people would call it astral travel. So we went, all over the universe. And I don't remember ever sharing any words or formed thoughts during this time, but he took me forward, he took me backwards in time. It was like there was no time. I mean, it could have taken 1,000 years to do that, what we did, or it could have taken a millisecond. And I became aware that that perception is something we impose on our reality, if you want to call it that. My body and heart and mind, whatever you want to call it, I felt so much joy, so much ecstasy. And it was a vibration of just pure love and light. And I felt that love and light were the same thing. But over the next few days, that's what I want to talk about. So my whole perception of the world was transformed. I could see I was at my daughter's soccer game. I could watch it from the bird's eye view. I could be in the grass and feel the pulsing energy of the grass growing. And my perspective could take me wherever I wanted to focus it. As time went on, I lost that. I lost that ability. I lost that perspective. I can recreate it in my mind, but it's not like I was living it. 9 times out of 10, if I look at a clock, it says 1:11, 2:22, 3:33, 4:44, 5:55, 11:11. I cannot tell you why, but I have this feeling every time that he just wants me to know that he's there with me. How we regard death, I think, can impact how we live and how we connect around that, how death can be a beautiful experience. For me, the meaning it had was, hey, look what's out there. Look what's possible. Look what's next. If I died tomorrow, I would want them to know that I'm okay with that. It's not a bad thing to die in itself. But here's the really big thing that's happened for me out of all this. My life, my professional direction has been transformed by this experience. I now am a writer, editor, and self-publisher in this genre of death, dying, grief, bereavement.
Yeah, I'm just exiting full. Bear with me as I do the technology to close this down. Thank you. So I was listening to Julie talk. I just made me think of the title of our workshop today, Awaken to the Transformational Power of the Shared Death Experience. I mean, Julie's life has been, in her own words, completely transformed to someone who's now an advocate and teacher, author in this field of end of life, because she was so moved and transformed by her experience at her father's death. But let's go to the points that we're focusing on, these gifts of the SDE. The first one being that death is not an end, but a portal or a doorway to another dimension. Julie speaks so beautifully and eloquently about this dimension that her father apparently invited her into, filled with love and joy, love and light. And then he takes her on a journey, both kind of a physical reality through the universe, as she describes it, but also we know it's a completely different reality because time and space is different. She's going backwards in time and forwards in time. So it's just this, we call this the heavenly realms as a feature as researchers here. And then the change in the time-space continuum is also another feature, if you will, of the shared death experience. And I really like this. She really highlights this third point we see as well as a gift in the shared death experience. And that is that loving relationships continue. This continuing bond with our departed loved ones that she has with her father, in the sense that every time she looks at a clock and sees the numbers 111 or 222 or 333, we call this synchronicities, post-death synchronicities. We see it in our research all the time. But what I love about Julie is this beautiful quote: whenever I look at a clock, I feel that my father is near me. Wow, that is such a way to just continue to have this connection. So yeah, those are kind of just a few of the many points that we could surface with Julie's lovely story at her father's death. Sarah, what comes to mind for you?
You know, I've heard that story a few times, and every time I'm moved by it. Julie, you capture that really well. You know, one of your points that no one dies alone. I think this demonstrates that, but it demonstrates something even beyond that, which is that it's impossible to be alone. This image and this experience that Julie had really dissolves the myth of individualism. And dominant Western culture has this sort of bootstraps, heroic, solo experience where we think that it's about us and that we're not connected. And that really leaves us a bit lost in a world that actually is connected. So it's an illusion, and these shared death experiences peel back the veil a little bit. And Julie had a great line, the one of hers I really loved. She said, I became aware that that perspective was something we impose on reality. And this transformational experience is really an experience of expanding our perspective and realizing that there's a bigger way to see what's happening. And it opens up all sorts of potential for meeting and living in a more complex way in a more complex world. And the other thing, and I also want to speak a bit to the clock part, those synchronicities. What that tells us, what that peeling back the curtain does, is really give us a picture of meaning. That death can feel really meaningless, like how people die, when they die, who dies, at what age. Those things can be hard to understand how that can ever make sense. But these synchronicities show us that even though we can't understand what's happening at this level, there is something behind it. There's some order in the cosmos. There's something we can trust, something bigger we can lean into. And for me, that's what the shared death experiences and all these transcendental experiences around death and dying do, is give us something that will allow us to bear what's happening, some way of holding it. So it's a beautiful demonstration of some of those gifts.
Beautiful. I just love hearing you talking, you taking your insights deeper into the appreciation, not just for the shared death experience, but for all these spiritual experiences that happen around end of life, and certainly the breaking down of this sense of us as being separate individuals. I mean, these experiences, and one of the terms we see all the time in the research is we call these unity experiences. I felt like I was one with everything. I love it when we hear that quoted quite a bit. I felt like I knew everything. I felt like everyone around me was with me and we were all one. So that's such a different experience than what we live here in the Western world. I should say in the human world, but the West has kind of made it a little extreme, the individualism. So with that, let's go on to our next case study. And this is Gail. And Gail's going to be sharing an experience with her father too. And she's in the hospital room of her father when this starts out. And then you'll see she gets moved into the waiting room, and then she'll have her SDE. Okay, let's get this started now. And by the way, you're going to see a photo here that's with Gail as a child, and then her father on the left and her mother on the right. Really quite a beautiful timepiece, if you will. I am going to do this now.
In this window, I'll just say I'm getting some messages that my mic isn't working. I just tried unplugging it, so I'm hoping that that'll make it easier to hear me.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we'll keep you posted. I'll give you feedback on that.
Hospital has the best grilled cheese sandwiches, and I was helping him with his menu. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, he had what I can only describe as an epileptic seizure, and he wasn't epileptic. And I went running out of the room, screaming for help. And the room was filled with hospital staff immediately. I was kind of in the way, so the nurse took me and put me in this little small waiting room. It wasn't really a waiting room that you'd think of with a lot of people in there. It was just a small office with a desk, a phone, and a couple of chairs, and I was all alone in there. And I was so upset, thinking, now my dad has another thing to contend with. What is he? What is it, a stroke or a heart attack? I was just thinking, oh my God, no more. And all of a sudden, I was in the hospital in that chair, but I was also in another realm. That's why you can actually, when people say you can be two places at once, I was actually two places at once. I was in this beautiful realm, and I was sitting in the hospital waiting room. And it was a beautiful day. I did not see anything in this realm that wasn't here on earth. A beautiful breeze, a country lane. There were birds singing. I didn't see anyone, but I knew I wasn't alone in this journey. I didn't see anyone, but I had a feeling I was walking, escorting someone. And it didn't matter where the journey ended up because it was such a beautiful day. I was just enjoying this marvelous day. And we turned a slight bend in the road, and we came to this huge gate. And the gate was like you'd see in a mansion, maybe behind it, a big gate, and then behind that was a mansion. Well, I saw this gate, and I had the knowledge behind that gate was a structure like a country club, say, or a meeting place. And I heard voices saying, hurry, hurry, hurry. We have to hurry. Walter's coming, and he's almost here. And then I knew who was speaking. My father's name was Walter, but all of his friends and people that he worked with called him Wally. But his family, his aunts and uncles and parents, always called him Walter. And of course, they were all deceased. But there was a big preparation. People were bringing flowers. They were setting the table, popping the tablecloths. I could hear the dishes being placed on the tables. Just an amazing experience that a guest of honor was on their way. That's the feeling. It was a guest of honor. And at that point, I think my dad went through the gate, and I was not allowed to go through. And then I looked around, and there I was back in the little hospital room. And then I didn't know. I mean, I know I hadn't fallen asleep. I was totally aware of everything, but I was glad during this experience that no one had come in that room, because it might have broken my vision. And I sat there wondering, well, gee, what was that? And the next minute, the doctor came in, and he looked very sad. And I jumped up and I said, how's my dad doing? And he said, I'm sorry, he's gone. And I said, no, it's okay. He went to the party. That's how clear it was to me. And the doctor just looked at me and walked out like, whatever. But I knew then what had happened. I had gone part of the way to heaven with my dad.
What a beautiful story. I'm going to drop this now. Bear with me while I do this. Okay, so a few comments here. Sarah, you might want to keep that away from your face, and thus you're talking, because I think I hear you breathing. I know it's frustrating when you can't hear when you know you're trying so hard. I have this happen to me to get the volume up, but we'll guide you on that. So what's so great about Gail's story, which she shares so well, so just use great descriptive language. Well, here's that first point: death is not an end, but a portal. And she describes being on this country road, walking with her father, and continuing. And she basically takes her father, or escorts him to a welcoming party, a welcoming home party for him. And she actually hears the voices of deceased relatives that are calling him by his, the name she remembers him being called by family members when she was a child. These are predeceased relatives, of course. And what a beautiful response she has to the doctor. It's okay. He's gone to the party. Now, in our research, we have a name for this. We call this the welcoming party. And we see this in a great many of our cases. So this goes to that second point. No one dies alone. Here's Walter, and he's getting greeted by his family on the other side. Sarah, go ahead. What comes up for you on this?
Again, it's an amazing story, and I know you feature it pretty prominently in the book. There are so many nuances and details. I guess one of the things that really speaks to me is the way our human minds make meaning of these energetic experiences. Because once we leave our bodies, body and soul separate, that's the experience of death, we enter into this landscape which is energetic. It's not a physical landscape, it's an energetic landscape. And when we're making that voyage with people, we're in an energetic landscape. And we need ways to describe what's happening. And, Gail experienced it as a country club with the corks being popped and the tablecloths being snapped and all of those things. In my sense, that's not a literal description of what was happening. That's a metaphorical description of what was happening. But we need that language. And what's interesting, I think, and of course you know this in your research too, is that different cultures and different people will see in different images that speak to them. So if you're entering into this process or you're thinking this is beginning to happen to you, go with what happened. Whatever image comes, I think sometimes people tend to diminish them. It's a new way of experiencing and speaking about what's happening when we can't speak about it literally. So I guess that's one thing. And the other thing that's really powerful is that there's a ritual. This country club welcoming party is a ritual. And that's a big focus of my work and what I teach. And there's a ritual happening on that side of the veil, on that side of the river. And in an ideal process, we're doing rituals on this side of the river. And we're organizing and preparing, helping the person say goodbye, helping the people here get ready to let go. And at one point, and the funeral is a ritual that happens on both sides. And we let them go. We actually give them a little nudge to help them make the journey across. So that ritual is a really core part of the experience. And it may appear as a party at a country club, but deeper down it has the really archetypal dynamics of a profound ritual process.
Well said, Sarah. Well said. I love listening to you talk about that. Yeah, and the fact that we see the welcoming party so often, and that the experiencer's response to seeing the welcoming party is that they can relax. They know that they have done their job as a loving, as a loved one on this side. And one thing that Gail says, another part in this interview, is that when I asked her, how did this experience impact you? Well, she said, I just felt so relieved and happy that my father was with his family on the other side, and I had done my part, and now he was well, and that she knows, I know I see him again. So yes, beautiful. Let us go on. We have one more snippet, if you will, from Gail. So Gail is going to talk about an experience, I think she had a few weeks after the death of her father. So same Gail, same death, just so you know. I'm going to cue this up. Bear with me as I do this.
And I remember several weeks afterwards, and I was going to go out and ride my horse and just kind of relax. And I remember my father loved there were three songs that I can't hear them without thinking of him. The first one was Green Eyes. The second was Alley Cat. And the third was Fascination. Every time I'd hear those songs, I just have to listen to them, every single word. So I had the radio on, and the first song that came on was Green Eyes. And it was great because they don't play these old songs too often on the radio. It's more, pop. So I was enjoying listening to Green Eyes, and I remembered how Papa liked them. The next song they played was Alley Cat. And I'm thinking, wow, that's really great. And I thought to myself, if the next song is Fascination, I will know my father is in this car with me, and he is going to go to the barn and have a nice horseback ride. The next song was Fascination.
So I smile when I hear these because I think of my kind of my history as a clinician and my own personal experiences. And then, of course, now doing the research. When I first heard these types of experiences, I thought, I think people are making a little bit too much of these experiences. I think they want to believe that their loved ones are communicating with them. But, I think a lot of imagination is at play here. But, I have been doing this now solidly for well over a decade. I hear these types of cases, and I've had them myself. There is something going on here, and the research proves it, that is far beyond chance or probability, if you will. And what's so amazing is that the experiencers, as Gail says, she knows that this is her father reaching out to her. And she even says, if I hear this third song, I know my father is with me in the car, and I'm taking him to the barn to ride my horse together with him. So I just want to affirm everybody that these are experiences that get to the third aspect of the SDE, which is the third gift is that loving relationships continue beyond human death. And they happen in a way that, as Sarah's pointed out, the energetics continue. I always say that we're energetic beings, and the communications that we have post-death manifest in ways that often involve electronics and energy. And I don't know how this all works beyond me, but it seems like her father was doing something to get the music to play a certain way. And there you have it. It's a mystery, but I want to encourage people to know that these experiences happen. We should affirm ourselves and others we know that we can dialogue more about them and bring these continued bonds into our family and community life around death and dying. Sarah, how about you?
I often think if I landed in the middle of some country, took a plane somewhere I didn't know how to speak the language, there'd be a kind of crude backing and forthing until we developed a clear way of communicating. And I see this communication across the veil in a similar way. We sort of make these gestures, and then someone goes, oh, I think that means that. And then we pick it up. And so what can happen is we can start to develop a kind of glossary for this conversation. Maybe at first it's a dime and you think, a dime? But if you actually say, oh, I'm going to take that as something, it gives a communication across which builds some energy on that. And these experiences with the songs, and people have them all sorts of patterns. You've talked about them, numbers, birds, insects, all of those things. And sometimes they're really specific, and sometimes they're a little bit more common and more people experience them. It's developing a channel of communication. And honoring what's happening. And it can really deepen. I've seen people get really far into that process where that communication can be really reliable and really reassuring and really inspiring.
Yeah. And I want to just add something to that. I know in my clinical practice, so many people will come to me and say in their time of need, oftentimes their loved one will appear to them in certain ways that let them know that they're with them, that they can hear them, and it's such a loving, affirming experience for, those of us who have lost loved ones to know we're missing someone, a significant other who's a part of our lives, who helped us and supported us and accompanied us through life's trials and tribulations. And so when we're having them alone, I notice there's a higher propensity for these experiences to happen then. And I think that's very affirming as well. So I think what I want to do now is I want to introduce the course, take a few minutes. This is the newest course that we're offering at the Shared Crossing Project. And it's going to be called Transformational Journey of Life and Love Beyond Death. This is really going to focus in a new and different way, a deeper dig than any course I have taught on the SDE. It's going to be looking at the patterns and the typologies that I have created, that I have found and now are validated in the research. And I think people find these patterns just absolutely uncanny and very affirming because it lets us know that the SDE has a form that we can study and that we can compare to other end-of-life experiences. I'm also going to be talking about the profound after effects, like how the SDE truly gives us and invites us to deep transformation, to awakening to our essence, to coming more in touch with what our life means to us and how we can make it more meaningful. And we also talk about the conditions and practices that enable the shared death experience. We are now learning a great deal about how the SDE happens for some and maybe not for others. I'm going to say it's a mystery, but what we have found is the beginning, the first steps in understanding why the SDE happens. And I'll share everything with you. I also want to say there's an important community component in this course, which is new in terms of other courses I've taught online. And this is something that we've been wanting to do, but now we're really going for it. There is going to be breakout groups that will be engaging with your other classmates or people along for this journey. There'll be opportunities to share stories, to engage in dynamic exercises. And there'll also be a community space, a forum online where you can go and meet in between the class sessions, which I'll tell you about, or the course sessions, so that you can connect, share stories, and have relationships in our Shared Crossing community with others in a meaningful way that fits for you. So I want to say something else here. Many of you have taken this Glimpses Beyond the Threshold course that I'm teaching currently with Raymond Moody. And this course that I'm going to be teaching is different. It's going to have minimal overlap. You will see some similar videos, maybe a guided visualization or so that's the same. But I can tell you 90% of the curriculum is going to be new to you and taught in a very different way. The course, the Glimpses Beyond Threshold, is more of a self-study. This is a high engagement if you want that. Of course, if you can't make it to the courses, you want to listen to the recorded sessions, that's perfectly fine too. But the format will be 7 weeks in a row, weekly 90-minute sessions, taught in a workshop format. I'll give a lecture, and then we'll do some exercises. There'll be lots of videos, which is the way I like to teach. And the course fee will be $297. There is an early bird 10% discount if you register before next Friday, April the 15th. And there's also, for the early bird registrants, I'm really happy about this. There'll be a giveaway for my book. I'll do a draw, and I'll give you a signed copy of At Heaven's Door. And then for those who are currently in the Glimpse Beyond Threshold course, you'll getting emails. You will have a discount code for yourself as well. So take a look at that. Also, for practitioners and professionals, there will be continuing education units for marriage and family therapists licensed clinical social workers, and RNs, registered nurses. Okay, so with that, I want to now take the next 15 minutes to take questions and answers about anything you'd like related to the content that Sarah and I have presented to you today in this webinar, and questions about the course as well. You can always reach out to the course at info@sharedcrossing. And you can ask questions on the chat now, because both Michelle, who's very instrumental in creating the course, and Kelly Rose, who's our administrator, are there. All righty, so questions. I'm going to go to this. Should I go to my Q&A, Kelly Rose? So Kelly Rose is queuing up questions for us. So the first question comes from Leslie. Has it been reported of an SDE by someone where an infant crossed over? Well, this is a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. And I will say that I begin my book with two cases in which infants, young babies, basically in utero in one case, die. And it talks about two women, one actually who works with us currently, Michelle, she's actually on the chat. Now, she has that experience, although that's not the experience we actually feature in the book, but she did have an experience where she lost her child. And so I'm just saying, we have that, and she's actually one of the researchers on our staff, so we're quite familiar with these experiences. But also, so what has one case I'll share with you is with Liz, and she's featured in the book, as I said, and she basically has an experience where her son Nicholas dies, and Nicholas's four grandparents come, and Liz talks about them. One of them, her paternal grandmother, saying, "Liz, we'll take Nicholas. We've got Nicholas. We're going to care for him. It's okay." And for her to receive that message is just so healing. So like I said, there's a very in-depth discussion of that at Heaven's Door. Sarah, do you want to say anything about that, or shouldn't? Yeah.
Yeah, just that a soul is a soul. A body and the body age is something of the physical dimension. And so in my work around miscarriage and abortion and infant death and helping people process all of those, the connections are as powerful. We love them as much, and the soul is as full and present, no matter what the age. So absolutely, this doesn't depend on the age of the physical body in any way.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Next question here, and this is from an email that I can't get the name out of. So, but thank you for your question. Someone's name begins with a V. I want to prepare a few family members to be prepared to experience a shared death experience with me during my transition. What is my best advice to them? Wow, that is a great question, and one that I get quite a bit. So the first thing I want to tell to V is that make sure that you, well, I know you want to have this experience, you want to give it to your family members, but make sure that they are interested in this. So that what I would do is not, just present this to them as something you would like to experience with them. And then the first step is really education that these experiences happen. And you can go to our website, sharedcrossing.com, to get resources on the shared death experiences and other experiences, V, because they may not have a shared death experience, but you may come back and visit them and as a post-death vision or visitation. So really engage them, if they're willing, in an educational process about what's possible around end of life, death and dying, and certainly post-death. Yeah, and of course, my book is a good resource, but I'm not saying buy the book. Just look at our website. That's free. Start there, and then start having conversations about these experiences. And by the way, you can always refer people to our website. I've given lots of webinars. I gave a great webinar with Sarah Kerr a number of months ago when the book came out. That's another way to learn about the shared death experience with, on your own terms. So yeah, Sarah, do you want to say anything about that too?
The educational focus is really it, and shared death experiences, the whole constellation of deathbed phenomena and transcendental experiences at the end of life. In my experience, they happen so much more often when people are prepared. And however people do their learning, for me, it's teaching family groups so
Yeah.
that there's a common language and a common awareness and a common openness to be curious. And that inner configuration of openness and, don't know what this is, but I'm going to let it be and see if it grows. That's the petri dish in which these things really develop. So again, and you talked about make sure people are on board. Sometimes they aren't. And there's another challenge when your family might not want to approach your death the same way you want to approach it. And there are other ways to pursue that and find that connection. But really, it's hoping to get your family to a place where they are on the same track as you are.
Yeah. Well said. And I just think that openness, receptivity, and curiosity are the key ingredients. And I always say, if we can get our loved ones to lean into wonder without having to know why these experiences happen, our brains are confounded by the shared death experience. We don't really have an understanding for how they happen, but we do know they happen. But if we lean into mystery and wonder, then I think you open the doors here. I have a question that's coming in from Eva Marie, I believe her name is. And Sarah, this is right up your alley. Could you speak to any shared death experiences with animals? Now I'm going to let you go first on that one, Sarah. Do you want to? Yeah.
I talked about the physical body not making a difference whether your soul is there or not. In my experience, especially animals who are part of our families, the death process and the way we meet it really matches. I mean, they're different, but in some ways, and for many people, the connection is even stronger than to other humans. So absolutely, all these phenomena, and I know you talk a lot about this in your book, can happen in the same way. Visitations, premonitions, senses of going with them. The way I hold it is that when we invite an animal into our family and we invite a pet, whatever, dog, cat, horse, whatever it is, we take responsibility for their physical well-being. And in a way, we also take responsibility for their spiritual well-being, and we connect in that spiritual way. And so I do a lot of work, and I have an upcoming class on this, about how to support pets as they leave their bodies and how to support the people, and adults and children, as pets leave their bodies. Because this connection and this pulling back of the veil happens with pets as much as it happens with humans.
Great. I want to emphasize that Sarah, I don't think she's even formally announced this yet, but we've talked about it. Stay tuned to Sarah, sacreddeathcare.com. And she's going to be offering, really, I think, the first course that I've ever heard of that's about sacred death care for pets and animals. So stay tuned for that, because I promise you it will be a wonderfully taught course. I've been working with Sarah on it a bit. It's all hers, but she's sharing some of the things she's discovering, and I know my community will be interested. Okay, next question here. This is from PT. In your research, have you come across any instance where reincarnation impacts near-death experiences? People talk about meeting deceased relatives from their current life, but what about other lives we may have lived? Oh, that is a great question. So to be clear, in both the near-death experience and the shared death experience, the deceased relatives you tend to see and identify are relatives that you know in this life. In other words, knew from this life that have predeceased you. So they're dead already. You see them in this, in this afterlife space, if you will. Do we run into people from past lives? I have a theory about this, just a theory, that sometimes you see beings that you don't recognize. I've actually had this myself, and I don't recognize them, but I realize they're important, but I can't place them. And I wonder if I always say I think they're either in my spirit clan, and that when I say spirit clan, I think that's people that I'm doing many lives with, many iterations of being alive, either in the human realm or in other realms. They're just part of my clan where we're doing things together. So I think your question's a sage one, and I would refer you, quite frankly, to Dr. Michael Newton's work on Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, because he talks a lot about that. Sarah, comments about that?
Bingo on the Michael Newton. That was going to be my first suggestion. He talked about how we need to put a metaphor on something to be able to experience the energy of it. And I think in the bigger picture of all this, we have experiences of meeting people we know, but they, in a way, are in the guise of someone we know. Just as here, we're spirits having a physical experience. And so we meet these people and they look like our mother or they look like our father. And they are, in that they're that connected energy, but they're also something larger. And Michael Newton's work talks a lot about how we go back into that zone, and at the early stages of the afterlife, people are distinct and they look like they looked when they were here or last time we were here. And as we go further in, we get a little more diffuse and a little more disconnected from these personas and more aligned with our energetic selves. So I think there's lots of opportunity for reincarnation and past life, and maybe even future lives, to be interwoven there.
Thank you. Agreed. This is from Keith. Keith, the presentation is always so positive. Not everyone has a pleasant life on earth and have relationships that are not entirely loving. Hence, the people that have passed before you may not want to welcome you. What about these unwelcome meetings? Oh, Keith, thank you for asking such a direct question. So I want to say this. This is a frequent question. So, hey, are these encounters with our deceased relatives always positive? And yes, we do. Many of us have challenging relationships in the human realm with family and friends and what have you, or enemies, whoever that may be. So the first thing to know is that in our research and in my clinical work now, with well over 1,000 of these cases, I have only on a handful of times, I mean less than, I can say 3 or 4 times I can think of right now, but I really do chart these. Does somebody have a negative SDE? That means they run into someone that they've never, in my experience, run into a deceased relative that they did not want to see or did not get a warm welcome from. I have had cases where they see somebody who they did not have a good relationship, or it was just like unfinished business, and the love and connection and acknowledgement that they did not have a good life, and the greeter on the other side, the spirit being who greets them, takes responsibility and acknowledges right away, apologizes for their role in that relationship. In that way, it's extremely disarming. I'm thinking of a case actually that came to mind, a man who talked about his relationship with his father being very, very conflictual. And he talks about seeing his father, and the first thing his father said to him was, "I'm sorry." That's the very first thing he said. And in that moment, the experiencer, the son said to me, I was so stunned by that, but I could also feel the sincerity in his heart. I knew he was real. He was totally different. He was vulnerable. He was at peace. He had no edges. He wasn't correcting me. It was a different being. He was in his essence. And with that, I could take it in and realize that we could heal and we were going to heal. So I think it's important to us to realize all of us are on spiritual journeys, and evolution and change occur. I have cases where people have distressing SDEs and other end of life experiences, but when I work with them, I help them see it through a different lens, and it shifts right in the clinical session. I work with people to see, what if you were to see it this way? But people get locked in their positions especially around negativity. So in the very few cases I've helped people find space around those experiences to at least entertain a different interpretation of them. I hope that's helpful. Sarah, you want to say anything about that?
Yes. The image I often have is of a theater, and there's backstage, and the actors are backstage and they're in their civilian clothes, and then they put on their costumes and they come out on stage. And I really imagine that's leaving the other world and coming here. We're backstage, we're connected, we're a team, and then we put on these costumes And oh, you're going to be the mother this time. Oh, you're going to be the father. Oh, this time I'm going to experience this in the life. This time I'm going to have ease. This time I'm going to have difficulty. This time we'll have conflict. So we come here and we enact these roles because there's learning to be done. And when we cross back over, those costumes come off. And Michael Newton's work has a lot to support this. But I work a lot with people who are facing their own death and are many times very, very worried about dying because they're afraid they're going to meet someone with whom perhaps they had an abusive experience. And so unwinding that, doing that, reframing, giving them a bigger picture helps that process. I think we're all at our heart pieces of the divine. We express in ways that are not beautiful sometimes, but that's truly who we all are.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah. I want to let everybody know that it is now the top of the hour and we are officially at the end of our hour. We said we'd do this for an hour, but I also want to let you know, I see a couple other questions. So for those of you who need to go, we honor you. We thank you for showing up and spending your Saturday, or if you're in Australia, it's Sunday, because I know there's from down under. Thank you all for being here. Sarah, would you be available for a couple more questions? Okay, great. So we'll do a couple more questions. And like I said, please consider a lot of the questions I'm seeing come across here about information about our courses. And I'm going to answer one right now. But reach out to us at info@Shared Crossing. We'll help you understand if this next course is the right fit for you. But Jennifer has a specific question right here. At the first webinar, I believe that's the webinar we did 2 days ago, Jennifer, if I understand you correctly, you talked about future plans for training. Will you discuss that again? I'm really drawn to this, signed up for the program, and I'm searching for a way to serve others. I cared for my husband and recently my mom. Now I'm learning about everything I can to find spiritual around this. Okay, Jennifer, yes. So I'm going to tell you something. This is not officially announced yet, but we will have our first Shared Crossing Practitioner certification program next fall. So this is the first time I've said that publicly, but more and more people are asking about it. They want more sophisticated training to learn about shared crossings and all these spiritual and life experiences, how to engage with people in a way that is appropriate, that gives them what they're looking for and needing if they're wanting spiritual experiences. This is the first course I'm aware of that's going to go into these shared crossing experiences. We'll provide the research, we'll provide clinical methods that'll be appropriate for death doulas, mental health practitioners, chaplains, spiritual care of all kinds. So that will happen. We'll also kind of give some ethical guidelines. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm very clear about the way we need to engage ethically and healthily with our clients. So all of that, you should receive that as a type of support, and so that you know that we're going to help you engage in this, these really tender, sensitive, but awesome subject matter in a way that can be appropriately received by clients. Yes, so that's that. Sarah, do you want to say anything? I mean, you have a series of courses as well that I think our listeners should know about.
Thanks. Yes, I have a series of recorded courses on my website now, which are available and are really helpful. One is on awakening the archetype of the death walker, which really is a great place to start. I find often people who are drawn to this work have an inner expression. There's a calling to do this. And we live in a culture that doesn't support that and doesn't give us language for it. So that course gives you some perspective and helps you put this calling in context and think about how to explore it and deepen it. And then I have a series of 3 about the soul's journey. And one module in that is about what happens as we're crossing the veil, one about what happens after we die, and another about the archetypal experiences for grievers. And I made those courses because with my clients, I teach the same things again and again and again. And it was just so much easier to put it in a package. So if you're interested in any of those, Michelle or Kelly Rose will put my link in the comments. I'm sure it's been there. They're pretty easy to find on my site, and they're a great place to start. So thanks, William.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. As you can tell, Sarah and I are very complementary of each other and very supportive of our work. So it's very common to see people in my community, originally in my community, now in Sarah's community, and vice versa. So just know that we are in this to support people as best we can with the resources that feel right for them. It is such a wonderful opportunity to, chart your path in learning about what's available in terms of teaching and approaches to a sacred end of life. And Sarah and I think, are just two of the leaders in this, and happy to be doing this and offering this. I think we'll ask one more question because now it's the 12:05. Kelly Rose, you have a preference here? Should I ask that first one from KFI? Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you. Can you speak about visitation dreams from loved ones that passed with a message for a friend, for other friend and relatives? Okay, this is a great question, and one that I have a great deal of personal experience with. So this, if I understand this right, and this is from someone at KFI, and call you Kay. So Kay, if I understand your question, you're talking about someone you know has died, or maybe you don't know this person has died, because it could be either or. But this person comes to you, they're deceased, and they have a message for you to give to another friend or relative. Now, I will say you, Kay, are probably highly intuitive, bit psychic, maybe even have some mediumistic qualities. Either that or you had a very, very close relationship with this person who died. That's the things I see in this. So yes, this is common. I frequently receive messages from people who have died, and they want me to deliver a message to somebody else. And sometimes I can't even understand what the content of the message refers to. So I would encourage you to do that and take the risk if you get those messages, because you're probably delivering a message to a loved one of the person who's passed in a way that's going to be healing or helpful for them. And I have many experiences where I feel like an idiot, quite frankly. Am I going to call this person up and say, hey, listen, I had this little vision last night. I'm going to give you a real one right now that I had. This person, it was your mom, and she was showing me that she was barefoot. She kept saying, I'm barefoot, I'm barefoot, I'm barefoot. And I'm like, well, okay, big deal. And then I go to the family member who just to share with the family member and the daughter, I say, hey, this is your mom came to me and she kept telling me she was barefoot. And and the daughter literally breaks down crying and says, oh my gosh, in the last days of her life, we kept telling her, put on your slippers, please. You're going to die of pneumonia if you don't put your slippers on. So the point was, the interpretation was, up here, I'm free. I don't have to wear slippers or shoes anymore. I'm happy. I'm content. So what a lovely message to be delivered. So I hope that works, Kay. So Sarah, any comments about this question here?
Yes, it's a pretty common thing. I actually just was working with a client not too long ago who's a hospice director, and she has these experiences. So she's involved, but almost peripherally. She's not the nurses. She's one of the directors. And she has a lot of questions about how to do this in an ethical way. How does she balance it with her professional obligations, and how does she do it appropriately? And I think there's some real skill around that. And what I always counsel people is to ask permission of the person. Would you like to hear this? And leave them in the driver's seat around that, because for some people it's too much, and it can be a big shock to come in. So to ask if they would like to hear it, and then to deliver it with humility. I don't know. I may be wrong. I didn't understand this, but this is my sense. Make of it what you will. Because sometimes we can gain a little bit of power or assumed power, and people, it can rattle someone's system a little bit. We want to make sure they're feeling secure so they can receive this as they want. But it can be really beautiful when these things come through. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say that, and Sarah, you articulated clinically just so beautifully, that sense of, be clear what you're wanting for yourself, because when you get a message, you have an invitation to deliver, to share, and then of course the way in which you want to do it. Sarah just explained kind of some great points to reflect upon, but also always be clear about what's in it for you. Like really look at what are you wanting, and make sure your intention is clear. Like you want to offer this, as Sarah said, with humility, with no sense of attachment for what they may receive or not receive from this. And a lot of people are open and a lot of people are not. So we just have to be do our best. So listen, we are at 12:10 Pacific time. I want to thank everyone for coming. And I want to thank my team here, Kelly Rose, who's been working the question and answer in the chat, and also Michelle providing information on the chat as well. And to you, Sarah, thank you. This is our second webinar in 3 days. Always a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. And you know how everyone who's on this call, you know how to reach out to Sarah and I. We welcome your inquiries. And thanks for being a part of our communities this morning.
Thanks for being here, William, and thanks everyone who's participating. It's been a delight.
All right. Bye-bye, all. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening.